Whatever. Well, hey, good afternoon. Welcome. Everyone's recovering from lunch here, so we'll try to keep this lively and maybe get done early unless you have lots and lots of questions. I'm Doug Metzgar. I'm the Assistant Deputy Secretary for the Office of Innovation and Improvement. We have Dean Kern, who I'm sure many of you know, and Jim Hauser as well. So Dean will talk about the charter school program. Jim will talk about some of the facilities programs that we have at the federal level. I'm going to start us off and talk a little bit about the bigger picture of NCLB reauthorization and some broad issues that are taking place at that level, and then we will get into the specific issues relative to facilities programs and then the charter school program. So I will go for a few minutes, and then I believe, Jim, you're next, and then Dean. So, and if you don't recognize Dean in his funky new glasses, that is Dean Kern. So, just came back from Italy and showing off. All right, well, let's jump right in then and talk a little bit about, hey, it worked, NCLB. So what is the timeline for reauthorization? What are some key issues facing the law overall, as well as charters or the charter school program? Let me first talk just a little bit about the timeline for, we don't have handouts of this, you're not missing much. Oh, is it? Is it actually at the back door? My apologies, so it should be at the back door if you want a copy of the PowerPoint. So timeline for reauthorization. Well, no shocker here, but not this year. There were some efforts last year. The House committee put forward a discussion draft. That was about as far along as the process got. The Senate made some efforts at the beginning of this year to put a bill together. They weren't able to bring that to fruition. So we are pretty much past the window of opportunity to reauthorize NCLB this year. Now, of course, stranger things can and do happen, so never say never, but the chances are very slim that we will see a reauthorization this year. So that leads to two questions. So when will it get reauthorized, and what does that mean going forward until it gets reauthorized? Well, the when is a great question, particularly given we've got, I don't know, a little election going on this year. So whoever the new president is and what their focus is when they come into office will go a long way toward dictating when NCLB gets reauthorized. It could happen in 2009. My sense is that it may be difficult to get it done in 2009. No matter who wins the election, there's going to be quite a bit of movement within the Department of Education as the new people bring in their folks. So as far as the administration having its, the new administration having its act together quickly, if education becomes a real focus, then it can be done. Although I would say to date, that education hasn't been the top tier issue that it was back in 2000 or even in 2004. So 2009, 2010 is also a possibility. What does that mean for in terms of when the changes hit the field? Even if the bill passes Congress, signed by the President in 2009, the earliest regulations would be promulgated would be 2010. So you're still looking at probably the 2010-11 school year before regulations actually hit the ground. And that could be a year later if the bill is a year later. So two things are going to happen between now and then. One is that Congress is more than likely going to continue funding the law. Now, they are going to make choices, though, about what they fund. For example, the House subcommittee, which is responsible for funding programs under No Child Left Behind, just marked up the bill, and they did not include any money for Reading First. It's a pretty big change. Now, we'll see what happens as that bill moves through the process. They have full committee this week. Then the Senate will take it up in July. But whether or not we actually see an appropriations bill is a whole other question. The sort of current thinking on the Hill is that individual bills funding any part of the government, whether it's education, whether it's ag, Veterans Affairs, you name it, are pretty unlikely to get through the process this year. What that means is that there will be some sort of continuing resolution that will probably continue to fund programs at this year's level moving into next year. So For example, for reading first, that may mean it'll get another year's worth of funding, or it might not. It's a big question that no one really knows the answer to at this point. But the way NCLB works is that states agree to take the money, and as long as the money continues to flow, then if the states agree to take the money, then the current statute, the current regulations stay on the books. So moving forward, NCLB will largely remain the same depending on which parts will get funded or don't get funded as you move forward. But largely it'll be the same law that we have this year that we had last year. What else can I tell you about reauthorization at this point? Let me tell you about some of the key issues then, in terms of what's holding it up or where the major changes will be. If you followed NCLB at all, you know that it's not exactly short for ideas on how to improve it. In fact, the Secretary of Ed has had a few ideas, and I will talk about those ideas that she's put forward over the last 6 months to a few years. One of the biggest issues, though, is accountability and the definition of adequate yearly progress. There are a lot of different ideas about how this should be changed. It goes the gamut from we shouldn't really have that concept at all to we should add more factors into the calculation of adequate yearly progress to let's just keep what we have, let's keep reading and math, let's keep annual targets, and let's keep the timeline to 2013-14. Now there are a number of groups who are very interested in the 2013-14. So they stay pretty strong in that it should be reading and math focused, should be based on annual assessments, and it should be focused on all students reaching a goal. These other groups, though, want to see that 2013-14 deadline changed and in its place have a different deadline for higher standards. Education Trust, for example, has put forward an idea that as states raise their standards from where they are now, that they would have longer to make proficiency targets for all students. Now that's not something that we would recommend, that's not something that we support in reauthorization from the administration perspective, but that's a very real idea that folks on the Hill are talking through. The big point though there is there's not a lot of consensus about how to move forward on adequate yearly progress. Another area where there's not a lot of consensus, although a lot of concern, is what do you do when schools are identified as not making adequate yearly progress? How do you intervene in those schools? Is the timeline for interventions appropriate? Are the interventions themselves the right kinds of things to be doing? That's another huge question that there's a lot of disagreement about how to best approach when the school's not making progress. How do you go in and begin to change that school's performance for the better? One thing, and I'll get to this in a later slide, the Secretary put forward an idea, a pilot project, if you will, for differentiated accountability, and that's a way to differentiate how you intervene in low-performing schools. A couple of other issues that will be big for reauthorization. One is the highly qualified teachers issue. Right now, the law has a highly qualified teacher requirement. I think we're at 94, 95+% of teachers being highly qualified according to NCLB. There's a lot of interest, including from Chairman Miller on the House side, to move to highly effective teachers, or looking at what are the results these teachers are getting and enshrine that concept into federal law. In fact, some would have you believe, and this may or may not be true, but press reports would have you believe that that was one of the major reasons why the House bill ultimately didn't go any further, was there was a big dispute, a big disagreement between Chairman Miller, who wants a performance aspect to teacher judging whether teachers are highly qualified or not, and the unions who are not in favor of that at the present time. And then finally, I think the other big issue we'll see, and this has been a perennial issue since the law was passed, is the issue of money. How much money should be appropriated, how much money should be part of the law, how much additional money should go into it, and whether we need additional programs. There's certainly lots of